This week, we welcome Jon Fredrickson, Information Security Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. In the Leadership and Communication segment, transformational leadership style inspires moonshot goals, how to deal with information overload, the surprising secret of success, it's not about winning, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. How do you stay ahead of attackers while trying to maintain the strength of your current security posture? At TrustedSec, they believe research goes hand in hand with security consulting. In addition to their established security offerings, they continually advance their own expertise with a dedicated, experienced research team led by Carlos Perez that works on short and long-term projects to assist their consultants during engagements, developing proprietary attack vectors and investigating new threats. Go to trustedsec.com/securityweekly to learn more about the pioneering research team at TrustedSec. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. Oh my gosh, my tongue is tied today. What is up?
What's going on, buddy?
This is episode number 128, recorded May 13th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by my co-hosts, Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque, and we are all in G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island.
It's a beautiful thing to have us all here together.
I know.
I love it.
It doesn't happen very often, and our guest is here too, so this is awesome.
We all have
here
Bloody
together.
Marys. It's wonderful.
Well, 3 of us have Bloody Marys.
Almost all of us.
No, 2 of you do, because I have a coffee.
Oh, you have a coffee.
He's got water.
He's got water. So.
I'm drinking their Bloody Marys, apparently.
We're only batting 50%.
That's it.
All right, Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for Black Hat and DEF CON. If you'd like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your request.
Now, very much limited this year in terms of briefings. There's only so many slots, right?
Correct.
And I think we've already sold 7 out of our however many slots we're doing. 8
out of 20.
Yeah.
So we have 20 slots, 8 already kind of booked, but we are going to do an Enterprise Security Weekly and a Pulse Security Weekly at the show, so there's still
already a lot of interest in those as well.
Yeah.
So if you you got to get on that bandwagon soon. I mean, Joe's back from vacation, so like
Look
slots
out.
are going.
Gotta love the sales guy.
That's right. They're flying.
Some of you have told us that you are overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you, find out what you're interested in. We've created our new listener interest list. Sign up for the list and select your interest by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the list. You can also now submit your suggestions for guests in our recently released guest suggestion form. Go to securityweekly.com/guests and enter your suggestions. Paul and I do review those. We definitely want to make sure we're listening to our audience and bringing those guests on.
I just updated them this morning, and we're trying to, in terms of free interviews, get a hold of the people that do Pi-hole, which is I ran some technical segments on it. It's basically like set up your own DNS black holing kind of server with like a 1-line command script. They do a great job over there. We're also trying to work on some of the other like bigger guests that you maybe not have heard. Like if you use SSH, there's a person who actually created SSH, right? We're working trying to get that person on the show, as well as some other folks like that. So your suggestions are always welcome as to who we should go after for guests.
And we always want to try to figure out how to bring them on to the different shows to help the audience with different topics.
Doug Song is really high up on my list right now to have on the show. I mean, he always has been, and it's one of those folks we just haven't had on the show yet. So, yeah.
We'll get there.
It's a lot of fun. Can't wait.
All right, now for our interview, Jon Fredrickson is Managing Director of Information Assurance and Information Security Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. Prior to joining Blue Cross Blue Shield, he was the CISO of Southwest Health and has held other IT security positions, including Qualys. Oh, that's where we know each other. Healthcare, services, and manufacturing. During the past 12 years of working in the IT security field, Jon has developed a pragmatic approach to implementing cybersecurity solutions and assisting his organizations in properly measuring and managing cyber risk.
Did you catch that little Rhode Island accent?
Totally.
Cyber security?
Cyber.
He's been spending way too much time in Rhode Island.
I like it in Rhode Island. It's G-Unit Studios doing it to you.
You gotta move the studio to Cranston.
I'm here. I have to fit in, I guess.
It's awesome.
Jon is a member of the Association for Executives in Healthcare Information Security, the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council, Cybersecurity Working Group, and is a certified information security manager. Jon, first, happy birthday.
Thank
and
you.
second, welcome to Business
Thank
Security
you.
Weekly.
Happy
Pleasure
birthday,
to be here.
brother.
Thank
Happy
you, sir.
birthday.
Now,
you.
this was planned for all those who are wondering is how did I coordinate the CISO from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island on his birthday? So, Jon, you and I go back a little ways to our Qualys days.
Yep.
Jon and I worked at Qualys together for a number of years. I still cherish the rib rub recipe. You left and you did some stuff on your CISO track and in the healthcare side. And
Wait, so Joe, what did you do at Qualys?
I was the post-sales technical account manager.
Okay.
That's what they called it. And then they tried to make me like a pre-sales, and I just couldn't. I'm not a salesperson, so.
yeah, anybody who knows the Qualys sales model is they use technical account managers. So think of it as kind of a sales guy and an SE in one. They have pre-sales and post-sales. Pre-sales guys are more on the sales than the SE side, but Philippe wanted them technical. On the post-sales side, it was really more SE than sales. It was really making sure the implementations went well. And Jon and
More
I
like a
worked
customer
together.
success in a post-sales.
Yeah, because
Kind
I
of
don't have
roll
a
that.
services arm, right? So a lot of it actually was just helping vulnerability management programs succeed. But
Right.
then there was a upsell quota every quarter, and it just got,
Gotcha.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where Jon and I first met. But I showed him when he came into the studio today because, it was his birthday and we kind of coordinated this around so we could celebrate his birthday with him.
We are. I'm celebrating with a Bloody Mary and a cigar. I don't know about
But when he walked in, I said, I showed him my inbox. And at the bottom of my inbox, and it's been there for years, is the rib rub recipe you gave me before you left Qualys. My kids absolutely love it. You are a competition barbecue guy as well.
Nice.
And so I had to show him that it goes way back in the years, and my kids still love that recipe. So
Yeah, no, it's great. This will be like the 9th season, I think, and it's a lot of fun. Even when we don't win, we still drink beer and cook meat all day long.
Everybody
It's
wins
not really
in
losing.
that model, John. I like it, right?
And if you don't sell it all out, you have dinner, right?
Yeah, well, we actually don't sell it. It all goes
Oh, it all goes.
only to judges. Yeah, we're not licensed or insured, to sell to the public. So we just we give it to the judges. They let us know how we do, and hopefully we take home some money. So
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Very
Nice. So let's start with a little background because, like I said, you and I worked together at Qualys for a number of years. But then when you left, you really started your track on to becoming a chief information security officer. Walk us through a little bit of that background because I think it's interesting.
Yeah, so I guess like originally my information security started in Rhode Island when they had something called the Cisco Networking Academy, where in high school you can graduate high school with a CCNA. And at the time then it was 2001, right? It was like, if you have a CCNA, you're going to make $4 million a year. And I was like, this is perfect. So let's, figure that out. That started me and got me an internship at a local company, American Power Conversion now, is Schneider Electric, down right next to URI, down south. So It was just help desk, I'm break fix computers, making sure people's laptops still work and that sort of thing.
And for the folks who don't know, down south means down south Rhode Island.
Yeah,
by the way.
sorry, yeah.
Down south Rhode Island.
That's a long drive.
It's past the tower.
Like we're in Warwick, Rhode Island. To get down south, it's at least 30, 25 minutes. We pack a lunch for that trip.
Yeah. And then like anybody, you start off information security just running firewalls, right? So did that, some host-based intrusion agents back in the day. It was the Preventia agent. Remember that guy's hair that would recede in the icon? It was the weirdest.
Preventia, I remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember the receding hairline.
You don't remember
that? No.
Even though Paul and I resemble that.
Yes, very much so.
Yep. And then VeriSign Managed Security Services, they were in Providence. They got bought by...
You had like the Rhode Island
That's
path,
it.
John.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
really did.
Yeah,
Jason knows.
totally.
I did that.
So Matt, there's only a few different paths that people take in
right.
Rhode Island in the like technology and cybersecurity sector, and definitely APC to was it VeriSign or no? What did you say?
VeriSign.
It was
It was
VeriSign.
VeriSign. That was before SecureWorks bottom, I think.
Yes.
Right?
There's
Yeah.
a whole. We didn't need an entire 30-minute segment to talk about DefendNet and VeriSign and all
literally.
Garden.
A lot of really
and,
sharp people coming out of
Yeah,
DefendNet,
exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Qualys, right? 18 months, I think I lasted there in that sales role. And,
I lasted a little longer than you.
yeah. And then CVS Health was really that kind of got me to that management track. That was my first manager job there. I was there for 4 or 5 years, and I saw a CISO gig at a hospital system in southern Massachusetts, and I applied. I said, hey, they can only say no, right? But they liked the kind of coming from more of a for-profit healthcare company to kind of shake things up at the hospital system, and I got that gig. It was awesome. I really liked it.
It's awesome. I like the path. I feel like a lot of people have taken similar paths of going on to do a lot of really awesome things because you work with so many smart people in those kind of Rhode Island quintessential companies, right? Like I worked for GTech before it was whatever it is now.
IGT,
IGT, right, in Brown University.
Yep.
And we probably knew a lot of the same people. In fact, one of the people I met in that journey was John Elliott, who now works for Carousel. So if you're doing Cisco stuff, I mean, John Elliott was I'm like, anytime you had with John was like, oh my God, like get my notepad out, right?
Absolutely.
Well, if you want to close the loop, I mean, Jason used to work with my mother. He was my kickboxing instructor in high school. It was like,
legit.
this is a real Rhode
It's a
Island
real
thing.
Rhode
Not
Island
even a
thing.
joke. Not even a joke.
So when I told him you were coming on, he's like, really? I'm coming in. We're
I'm
doing that
crashing
show.
the show. I am crashing the show. But then like a week later, they're like, hey, do you want to be a permanent co-host? I'm like, sure.
Sure. But you're like, I'm coming for this interview anyway. So I know John for
Like it or
years,
not,
so.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
And now we're business partners, really.
I know, honestly,
Blue Cross and Carousel have a relationship, and we work together on a professional level again. So it's kind of fun.
It's really, it actually is really good, right? It's kind of nice to be able to say, hey, John, let's go out for dinner and hang out as friends.
Yep.
But then when we get in the room together as that vendor business partner relationship, because we talk shop when we go out for dinner, we're on point. Like, I mean, we literally know, we know each other's personalities and in kind of what businesses we're in and really where we need to strategize together for us to both be successful, right? So it's great. It's a great relationship.
Somewhat kind of not technical question, but when I talk to folks that are doing dark web research and looking at what motivates an attacker to go after health records, how does that enter your world being in the insurer route versus the kind of healthcare provider route? Like, what's your view of what the attacker's motives are to get at the data that you might be storing?
Yeah, so you look at like all the Pokemon data where they say, health record is worth 150 times more than a credit card number.
Yep.
If you actually go on the dark web, it's not selling. Medical information is either for free or, less than $1 per record. And that's why you see the shift of the past 3 years to ransomware, availability attacks, right? Because they're not selling the data, so they're just going to lock it up, make it unusable, and people are going to pay to unlock it.
Yep.
We've now even seen a trend where it's no longer, it's not as much ransomware. You saw a dip in 18. I guess it's ramping up again in 19, but now it's just EFT, business email compromise attacks, right?
Yep.
How do I become a doctor and change routing numbers for claims payments?
Yeah.
Right?
So they're looking for more of the quick and easy wins, because some of the research that I've been made aware of is that if they get a hold of a health record, there's different ways to monetize that. But it sounds like that takes a little too much work, right? Like I can do prescription fraud.
Yeah.
I might be able to get a credit card number that might be in there. I can do other types of fraud potentially to monetize that. Sounds like that's too much work. Like ransomware, these other attacks are much easier, right?
Yeah, get money right away.
So if the So protecting the record now is a little different than for aspects of protecting the record are different, right? Because if they can't sell it, then it's all about how do you make it resilient to potentially ransomware attacks. Is that where you're seeing the majority of your challenges of how you're driving some of your solutions? And
yeah. So resiliency is always the forefront of my mind. But also we're highly regulatory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you look at the fines coming from the Office of Civil Rights or any of the 50 now privacy laws of any state that wants to fine more or less money than the other state. That's also a lot of incentive too to make sure that we protect ourselves, because the fines are hefty.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, even if it's not making money on the dark web, you still have to report it.
Yep.
You still have to report it. That's still the brand of the company, right? So, I mean, there's that other side of it, the compliance side and the reporting of the breach side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we were talking right before this. You also took on the privacy role as well. So how does that influence some of the decisions you have to make? Because security and privacy are this really interesting balance, I think, is yes, we want to protect the privacy of the data, but then does that also limit what you can do from a security perspective in the organization? So how does that play into this kind of combined security privacy role?
Yeah. So I took over the privacy officer role about a month and a half ago, and I'm still learning. Like, I understand the HIPAA privacy law. It's kind of in lockstep with the security rule. But it's the other stuff of like, hey, somebody's husband called the call center and they said they need their wife's explanation of benefits. Do I give that information to them, right? And understanding those nuances of the HIPAA law. So that's something I'm still learning. But I think, like, if I could sum it up, it's like information security where you're always also really concerned about your ethical decision, right? Not that I'm an unethical CISO or something like that along those lines, but you're really understanding of like, what should I also be doing, for accounting of disclosures if I ever give this information to a third or fourth party? What are they doing with it? How are they handling the data? So it's a lot of interesting decisions.
It's additional legal, right, mindset you have to be.
Yeah, and I was telling you, Matt, I think that the only way that I'm successful, or hopefully going to be successful in this role, is because I report to general counsel. So I do have a team of the lawyers to help me, and I've got some external counsel and retainer that I can call up and say, can you help me interpret this issue that I'm having? Because the law, of course, it's written as clear as mud anyways.
Yeah, right.
It's interesting. We run into that all the time here on Security Weekly. We cover news stories in so many different aspects, and sometimes we just have to be like, all right, we need someone who's an attorney to weigh in on this and give us their expertise and knowledge, because I don't know how to answer it. Sometimes that's an international law. Sometimes that's local here to Rhode Island.
Exactly.
And everywhere in between.
Yep.
Yeah, and in your case, multi-state potential laws and other things that fit into the mix. But what's interesting is you report to general counsel, right? When we interview CISOs, I'm always curious where they report, because traditionally the CISO reported up to the CIO, but we're seeing more cases where the CISO is reporting into other groups. General counsel's one.
Yep.
I've seen them report into operations, potentially even into finance. So it's always interesting to understand kind of the different reporting structures, because as you take on more of the legal compliance requirements, being under the CIO may not make sense because it doesn't align well to the business.
Right.
And so you being there is interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of a learning experience. When I was at the hospital system, it was to the CIO, and you're in all those meetings of like, here's my next project I'm doing. John, what is your opinion, So it took some time to really figure out, how do I align with the CIO? What meetings do I need to be at to make sure I still have that purview, and him and I work really well together. So,
well, I think that's why it works, right? Because you still need, in either case where you report, I think you need a good working relationship either with general counsel and with both, right?
Yep.
With both arms.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we're at a point where a CISO, especially one that has compliance or regulation and privacy that falls under their umbrella, has to have a good relationship, I think, with every business unit leader.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
because
that's a great point,
HR
Jason.
has an effect, right? For us, we need to make sure that our background checks are in check, right? We're doing the right things for our customers, right? We need a good relationship with the CFO, right? Because we want to make sure if it hits the fan, he's the one who's going to be in behind me writing the checks when things need to happen, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to have that. We're at a point now where we need to be creating those relationships across the entire business.
Yeah, and this is the alignment of the CISO position tighter integrated with the business.
Absolutely.
Right? In regardless of where you report, I think having that dialogue across the different business units is important because you have to align the risk profile based on the business and how the business wants to drive it. So those interactions, how do they work for you today? I mean, you talked about, which meeting should I be in with the CIO? I'm sure you have the same conversations of what meeting should I be in with the CFO or potentially other parts of the organizational structure. How does that look for you today?
Yeah, so a lot of it is actually, which is nice, taken care of through existing governance committees that I'm part of. For the ones I'm not, we try and set up a cadence where I'm quarterly meeting with the division leaders, whether it's for the call center or digital strategy, marketing, human resources, the whole bit. If you look at the way I've structured the program, I've got a 3-year roadmap, which is really, really high level. But every year I do a deep dive strategy, and I only operate that strategy upon 3 things. It's the corporate strategy is number 1. Number 2 is threat intelligence and my own metrics. Right? How are people attacking? Right? I'm not going to invest in this system if it's not going to protect from these types of attacks. And then 3, of course, is regulatory. I'd say regulatory, unfortunately, is bubbling up more. You've got the California Consumer Protection Act, right? We're a nonprofit, so we're exempt from that law, but it's only going to be a matter of time where people are going to say, hey, let me take a look at this. And, I don't think that healthcare agencies would be ready for a delete me notion, something like that, of like, hey, I'm no longer a member of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Rhode Island. Thanks for your services. Delete me, right? Certainly there's HIPAA laws that need to come and check. Like I need to keep that for 7 years or whatever. But it's an interesting. So that is actually kind of beginning to drive my strategy more than it has in the past.
So HIPAA says you have to keep the records for 7 years, but other regulations could conflict with that potentially?
Yeah, well, you see it like the California Consumer Protection Act. They just said if it's healthcare data, this doesn't apply.
Gotcha.
Yeah, at a high level, of course,
Sure.
But so nobody's touching it, but they need to. Somebody needs to have that conversation of like how does our medical privacy laws that are from 1996, like even like your Fitbit is exempt from HIPAA laws. Like now you have an EKG machine on your wrist if you have an iWatch, right? Exempt from any HIPAA law. It's just not in there. So it's got to be refreshed, I'd say, anyway.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. Well, it was drafted in 96, but it wasn't actually implemented until
99, I think.
Was it 90?
And then you're thinking high tech, right? When
high tech kicked in.
Yeah,
after.
high tech kicked in. Yeah.
So Matt mentioned something about risk profiling the organization, right? Now, does Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island have an actual risk officer as well, or do you play that role too?
No. So we do have an enterprise risk management team, right? And him and I are in lockstep. Right? One thing we're really working on now is I need to make sure when I say something is high risk, it's the same high risk that he has, and the same thing of internal audit. I think that we could probably have some improvements there of like my likelihood, impact, and vulnerability. It's very different than maybe he's got a top risk of membership accounts or how much we have in reserves, that sort of thing. But when I say it's high risk, that it's the same notion of high risk that he's communicating in the business because it's the same. All funnels up to the board.
Right.
And we're working through.
And
that
you
right
need to
now.
be speaking the same language at the end of the day.
Yep.
You don't want to be contradicting each other. You don't want to be, reporting to the board and one person saying high risk, the other person saying medium risk,
or low risk, or whatever.
And everybody's confused, right?
Yeah.
So you guys.
Cybersecurity is always, it's always a top risk. We've got let's say 10 of them. Cyber is always one. It has been every year I've been there and before that too. So I do manage that top risk through him with leading indicators and that sort of thing, that whole cadence. But definitely we speak every day.
Yep.
But now, John, in Rhode Island for Blue Cross Blue Shield, how many employees are part of the work in Rhode Island as part of that organization?
So we do leverage outsourcers, right? So when you look at employees, we've got 800. You look at including the contingent workforce, we're at 2,000.
Gotcha.
And quite a bit do live in the Rhode Island or Southern Massachusetts area.
So you have to protect those from an IT perspective, protect those workers in addition to all of the other aspects of the. You put a lot on your plate, John. That's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's not as complex as a hospital system, right? With a lot of the interconnected devices, it's definitely a complex the way that Blue Crosses work, right? So if you are a Blue Cross member in Rhode Island, if I need to take medical services in California, I will get the prevailing Blue Cross rate in California. So we have to share some claims data. That's really complex. The other 36 plans across the country in Puerto Rico on how that works. That's an interesting. Still trying to wrap my head around that a year and a half later.
Right. I'm sure.
It's not like I'm managing the interconnected metal devices in 15 ERs or something like that.
Yeah, right.
So.
You don't have to worry about multiple hospitals and all the medical devices in the hospitals, but you still have reach because of the sharing of data across the national kind of network plan that has to be managed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you actually talk about that a little bit? Because, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island has a level of autonomy but you also have a higher umbrella that you have to
Yeah,
kind of work with, right?
I don't know if the Blue Cross Association legal would like this analogy, so I apologize ahead of time. But it's like, so we're essentially a franchise, right? We're a licensee technically, but we are independent companies, and we license the ability to have the Blue Cross and Blue Shield logo. It's a very powerful brand. You look at healthcare and payer, you're like, oh, that's maybe it's a form of trust. But there's 36 of us. They range from the smallest one. I don't know we're like the 6th smallest, right? So there are some smaller. I think Idaho's small. There's a few other ones. And then the largest, Anthem. They're larger than the other 35 combined. And they're also, traded on the stock market. We're a nonprofit. So you can have very different business models, right?
So you can have a for-profit franchise and a non-profit franchise. That's interesting.
Yeah. Some are just Blue Shields. Like California is not a Blue Cross or Blue Shield. They just
What's the
license
difference?
the shield.
So what's the difference between the cross and the shield?
I think it's like historically it was like insurance for just doctors versus. I don't know. You're like quizzing me here.
I know I am.
There is a difference.
I'm curious. My wife works for Lifespan, so I get a lot of interesting insights into our healthcare system, specifically here in Rhode Island.
So now from a security, compliance, and privacy perspective, what's the influence like at that higher umbrella level, right? Is there a trickle-down influence of policy and procedure?
We do a very, very good job of collaborating. I think this came out of the Anthem breach of 2015. Where they realized that if one plan gets breached, everybody just says, oh, it's a Blue Cross. Like they assume that it's one company, which is fine. I think that works for brand power. But, I think there was some attrition felt across the board on membership when that happened. So at the association level, they mandated, hey, we got to do better at cyber. We got to work together to do that well. So every single quarter, the majority of us meet in person, which is great. So I'm collaborating with the larger plans face to face. We pick a different spot around the country. And we've set up threat intelligence sharings. I'm sharing indicators of compromise in real time with Massachusetts, Vermont, anybody around the country. But we also do, there are requirements that licensees must meet, and now we are developing cybersecurity requirements, right? But it's us developing them ourselves. It's not like there's a third party saying, oh, you should have.
So Anthem was the largest for-profit, the largest licensee of the Blue Cross Blue Shield's health insurance.
So they have the most members, right? Or revenue. I'm not sure where.
However, a couple of different metrics being the largest. And they suffered a breach, but now you're working together to kind of combine your collective intelligence and knowledge about cybersecurity.
For the overall good, right?
Yeah.
The overall good.
Yep.
So does that then create certain initiatives then across what you have to now implement locally as a standalone?
Yep. Yeah, it helps drive the technical roadmap. Yeah, certainly. Okay. Yep.
And then
which makes it an easier sell too. If you
then it becomes a mandate, right? It's just like
our franchise essentially is saying we have to be compliant to these things, and makes it an easier sell.
Yep.
So you're year 2 into your 3-year plan ish.
So I'm year 2. At here, listen, I really enjoy it. It's really close to home. They got a great culture there. I've got number 2 on the way as far as children are concerned. So
that's good.
Congrats, that's awesome.
So where are your focus areas kind of in your plan? What are some of the things you're focused on now that you're in this part of the plan? Where are some of the big problems you're trying to solve? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I'd say I'm a big proponent of foundation, right? So this is the second CISO role I've been in, and I can proudly say the first year of each CISO, role, I didn't spend any money, right? I listened for 3 months, I think for 3 months, and then I figure out a plan. But I'm not just going to go in there and be like, oh, we need EDR. I'm going to go buy some behavioral detection engine. I don't operate that way, right? I'd rather be like, hey, let's take a look at asset management. So I'd say that we're still focusing on some of those fundamentals. Okay. One of my big initiatives going into 2020 is really going to do business impact analysis, really integrate disaster recovery, business continuity data with the CMDB and with a privacy impact analysis that I know that if this server gets compromised, it has this many records, it does this for the business, and this is who I call, right? We have it today. It's in 14 different systems, right? So we're trying to bring that together.
I love it's like a talk right there, John. Like how to be an effective CISO without spending any money. Yeah. Right. Like that's that's a thing, right? I think that's a very powerful thing.
Well, and I think part of the challenge is you walk into a position, you're thinking, okay, I got to do X, Y, and Z. But what you said is you kind of step back and say, let me listen for a few months. Then let me start thinking about what a plan looks like. Because it may not be X, Y, Z. It might be A, B, and C over here, right? Back to the fundamentals.
Yep.
And what you brought up, I thought was just, I've said this multiple times. We had a debate about this the last show of Pulse Security Weekly. You know, what are some of those basics you put in? Asset inventory, business impact analysis, understand what's critical in the environment. Based on that, now you can start thinking about concepts of resiliency, but also what security controls can I put in place? And I think sometimes we forget about the basics where we don't really understand our assets. We don't understand how critical they are to the business. So how can I implement a plan until I understand those basics? And you kind of, in your last two roles, have stepped back, kind of looked at that picture first, and use that as your foundation before you actually start spending money in certain technologies.
Yeah, because if you overlay something shiny on poor asset management, it's not going to work, right? And you're spending a ton of money to not get successful or not see 100% of the value that you expected to see, right?
Yeah, but this is the evolution that we talk about on shows all the time, right? The maturity of the CISO becoming a partner of the business. Yeah. If you're a partner of the business, you have to walk in the door and figure out what current state is. Right? Yeah. If you don't know current state, you can't map out to future state. You don't know what your gaps are.
I could probably guess most organizations that any of the four of us would walk in, and many of our listeners, right? The number one problem we might uncover is asset management.
Absolutely.
It's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that when we're on the offensive side as pen testers, when we're blue teams and defenders, that we all struggle with, whether we know it or not, is we struggle with what do we own? Because you can't protect what you don't know. And we said that at Tenable, like how many times, over and over again. Like how do we discover what we have so that we can protect it? And it's a huge gap, I think, in so many organizations today.
Yeah, but it's that next step too, which is understanding the criticality of that asset. Once I understand it, because that drives your risk profile. Yep. These are my risky assets that are could have potential huge business impact to the business. I better make sure I protect those assets first 100%. Before I go off and do anything else. And that's where I'm going to invest, right? You can't just invest blanket across the entire organization, right? So if I'm sitting back and I'm saying, I have X amount of money in my budget to protect things, right? Am I going to say, protect that marketing server that's full of PDFs that I want traveling around the world anyway, promoting carousel? I may invest in my ERP system and protecting that, right?
Now, the devil's advocate side of that is, as a pen tester, we're going to prey upon that weak link of marketing,
of course,
right?
Of course.
But I think that's the kind of next thing that might be missing is, sure, you can know where your assets are, but how do you prevent the kind of trickling effect of, I find the lower level marketing server, I find these lower level vulnerabilities, and I build an attack plan.
That's right.
And that's where a lot of attackers and pen testers are so successful today.
When you sit down as a CISO and you have to weigh options, right? Yeah. I'm looking at my highest level of risk at that point. And for my ERP system to be compromised is huge, right? I mean, that's a massive breach notification that we're going to have. We have all of our customers' information in our ERP system, right? So I'm going to invest money there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the smart guys on my team and say, harden that marketing server, right? Harden the network around it, make sure we're doing the right things. Maybe it's a web front end out in the DMZ, something like that, right?
But that's a page right out of good to great, right? You take your best people, right?
That's right.
And you put them on what's most important in your newer initiatives.
You got it. 100%.
So when you think about alignment across the business, how do you think about metrics in what you're reporting up to the rest of the executive team?
It's a great question.
Yeah. So, we've got the cyber as one of the top risks, right? And then every year annually, I say, what are the actual threats, right? Because the top risk is worded like, we could be compromised or could be hacked or we could lose data, right? So how are we losing data? And one of the good inputs this year that we had actually, so coming out of the Cybersecurity Act of 15 or 16, there was that 405D it was called, and they issued a paper called like the Healthcare Industry Cybersecurity Practices. And they said, these are the top, I think it was like 5 threats to healthcare. It was published, and the HHS sponsored it. It was great. It was like, listen, if the Office of Civil Rights is going to audit us, I might as well use this as a threat because you helped publish it, right? So,
right.
And in there, we looked at the top threats. Ransomware. It was just general data loss. They had medical devices. I just equated that more like IoT or insider threat type thing. And we built out those. And then I sat down and I said, what are the leading indicators? And I did performance indicators of how am I doing with all these things. So you look at like ransomware in particular. One of the performance indicators I have is what is my click rate? Not how many emails am I blocking, that sort of thing. When they get in, they inevitably do, how many people click on that link, right? And I've got a a risk appetite on that of a certain percentage. And as long as I'm operating underneath that, I know that that particular threat may or may not be at risk. So that level of detail only rises up to vice president, maybe the executive leadership team, right? When I get to the board, the only metrics they see is my maturity ratings on the 5 foundations of NIST CSF, and that is it.
Nice.
They know I have key performance indicators. I talk to them about how I develop them. They don't know what they are, right? But yeah, they see 5 scores 2 times a year.
Yeah. Got it.
Yep.
So you break it down into the NIST cybersecurity framework and really kind of look at your maturity. Do you use kind of the 1 to 5?
It's based on CMMI, right? Everybody does it, but I do 1 to 4 because I took out a middle. When I was doing 5, everything was a 3. Right? So now I have to force something
You're
visually that's
forcing
either
yourself to make a decision,
I'm
right?
not very good at 2.
It's a
I'm
2
kind
or
of
a
good
4.
at
That's right. That's right. That's cool.
And that was easier to consume as well. And I don't know. Nobody's a 5. Maybe you are if you got 1 server and no DMZ.
Yeah, maybe. Great. So that maturity, does that then help drive conversations for you about next year's budget and where you want to improve those maturity? Do you use that as that lever then?
Yeah, we're going through that exercise now of, what technology investments do we want to make as an organization? What I'll do is I will show the perceived maturity increases by control category if we were to do this investment, right? So let's say, if we purchased XYZ, I forecast that out of the 112 controls in this CSF that we get maturity increases in these 12, and this is what it would do that I could present to the board if we made this investment, right?
But this decision tree is different in every organization, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so in your
100%.
organization, where do you foresee the next investment? As an example,
yeah.
right? And again, if people are listening, it's not going to be the same for everyone, right?
Yeah. So on the technology side, some things that we're looking at in 2020, we're really into EDR on how can I get really good forensics detection capabilities in my server farm, or really understanding if one was compromised, what happened, how it got in, that whole thing.
Time to detection, decreasing
Yep.
that. I think you can achieve that with the technology available today in EDR, whereas 5-10 years ago, maybe not.
Yeah, and we've got a legacy AV vendor that just isn't there. So we're really looking at there. And you look at the way NIST CSF is, so in the detection category and the respond recovery, you can see that there's some maturity increases that could be had with that type of technology. So that's one thing we're certainly looking at.
Right. In offsetting maybe some of your protection mechanisms to improve detection and response rates, because maybe you can't fully protect against it, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think you have to make some of those trade-offs from a budget perspective at some point to say, look, my traditional protection platform isn't cutting it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make some investments to reduce my dwell time and my MTTRs, right? My response time. In lieu of that, maybe I pull some money out of my protection budget to do that, to gain some efficiencies there, but maybe I don't take a hit maturity-wise in my protection space. I mean, are those valid?
Yeah, there's ebbs and flows.
trade-offs?
Yeah, because I'm not going to be able to have 15 agents on a server, right? It also has to compute
but the
and
market
operate
thinks
in the
you
business, right?
But the market thinks you can, so
Oh,
it's
of course,
okay.
yeah. Well, none of them actually take up system resources. They're mythical creatures on servers, but yeah, there's absolutely give and take on that in that conversation, right?
Yeah. And then how often do you report up into the board? Do you report quarterly?
Twice a year, biannually, and that's to the audit committee of the board.
Okay.
But I will go to the full board for the first time next month.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. So I've seen that split too, right? It is sometimes the CISO reports on a more frequent basis to the audit committee and maybe not to the full board.
Yep.
So twice a year to the audit committee,
Yep.
once to the full board.
Yeah, if that becomes a pattern, yeah, we'll see. Yep.
Okay.
And now are you using NIST as kind of that framework to report?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
Yeah, they'll sometimes ask for a deep dive on some things. So
Yeah.
last time they asked for a deep dive on third-party risk.
Yep.
Show them the program, how we assess vendors like
Yep.
yourself.
Yep.
What's our risk posture on that, and that was actually a really nice conversation. And I was glad they asked that question because if you look at what's taking up the majority of my time from my team's resources, a lot of it is third-party risk, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not slowing down. Everybody's using more vendors to help out with different things, and
Yeah, you were talking about you have some outsourcing relationships, which is it's a third-party risk component that has to be managed.
Yep. Yeah, so we were making technology investments on how to do that faster. and more accurately. You know, we've got a large GRC footprint, and we're trying to figure out how we can get some automation there. We do have, you know, self-service questionnaires the vendors can log in and actually answer themselves, and it kicks off some workflows. So we're getting there.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's good.
no, very good. Any other questions for Jon while we have?
I'm good.
Awesome.
Good to go.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Can you gonna hang out for the next section?
Sure,
Se-
absolutely.
I'll hang out for some
All
leadership
right.
chat.
Really can't.
I
talk.
know I can't talk today.
It's getting worse the more you Bloody Mary you drink.
And that and 4 hours of sleep, I think, is what's doing it for me today.
Yeah, because you came in
Yeah,
this
he
morning
was
on a red
I
eye.
did.
Yeah.
I flew in the red eye, so
Yeah.
4
You're
hours of
excused, my
sleep.
friend.
Wow. I don't think the Bloody Marys are helping. Anyway.
Not after a red eye, no.
We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week. Awesome.